backyard was a disaster for a number of years because I could never get the grass to grow. And my previous dog used to come out and pee in it, so there were always little dead spots where a little female dog would, do that all the time. And I finally, 3 years ago, just got angry one day and said, I'm sick of this grass, I'm sick of the brown spots, and I just came out and started digging it up. And every time I dig a little, I dig more, and it got to be, as you can see, fairly large garden. That my next step was figuring what to plant, and my main goal was to find things that the deer wouldn't eat. So since I had had a few junipers put in before, I knew junipers were really deer resistant. So you'll notice that there's mostly junipers. The wonderful thing about junipers is they come in different shapes and sizes and colors, so you can get a lot of variety with one species. So you see you've got the very low growing ones. We got the one there that's a little taller. That one's called gray owl. The really pretty one here, the bluish one, I've got several of those. So predominantly the front was planted with keeping deer from destroying everything. The white ones here are potentilla. Potentilla, a lot of the wild ones are yellow, but they have some white ones, and I thought the white added a little bit more brightness. I do have a yellow one over in that corner that's not doing too well. And I've tried some pink ones, but they've been a disappointment. But the white, I think, has done really well. It brightens things up a little. Next to that, I have a dark-leafed Weigela. The deer will nibble on that occasionally, but he hasn't done too much damage. And then I've got a Rose of Sharon, which is the tallest shrub there. That has gorgeous pale pink flowers on it until the deer do nibble them off. Again, they were all supposed to be very deer resistant, but I think Del Mar deer will eat just about everything. So. But generally they're doing well. I do have lavender. This is several different varieties of lavender. Again, the deer leave those alone. And then these grassy things is little blue stem, which is a native prairie grass, which absolutely thrives in hot, dry conditions. The deer leave it alone, and it reseeds. So I ended up with a million little plants every year. But either I move them to other places like over there or give them away. So. That's been a nice addition. It has a different shape. And even in the winter, it still has some of the leaves that stick up for even a little bit of interest in the winter. Well, when I moved in, this was pretty much a weed patch. There were a few things coming up, but over time, I've stuck different things in. Unfortunately, there hasn't ever really been a plan for it because I'd put something in and it wouldn't survive, so then I'd get something else and try that. But it's sort of beginning to have a life of its own now. A lot of the iris here, they just finished blooming last week. They were gorgeous. A lot of them I got from my father. I grew up in Latham, and he had them in his yard in Latham, and he got those probably in the early 60s. A few others I did buy as a pack a couple of years ago, and for the first time, the one clump here, which had the most gorgeous pale yellow flowers on it, bloomed this year. The peonies are blooming right now. You can see they're coming out. The rose, I think, has always been there, but it never really was very profuse like it is now. So this year, that's really taken over, and it is really looking beautiful climbing up the chimney. I got Joe Pye weed here under this window and under the other window. That's a late bloomer. It gets much taller than that. It usually comes out late August, early September. And then this stuff here, I can't remember what it is, but it gets huge. It's got a yellow flower on it. It's just got a profusion of yellow flowers on it. And they usually come out like late July, early August. The daylilies are coming out, but you notice I've got netting up here. If I don't have the netting up, the deer would get to them before I would ever see a flower. But they should be out. I've noticed there's a bud on this one here, and there's a couple others. So they should be out in another couple weeks. And fortunately with the netting, I'll see them before the deer get to them. So, and then I've got more clumps of lavender. Another thing that grows in the hot, dry area, and the deer leave it alone. So those are the basics in here. Well, when I moved in again, this was pretty well overgrown. It was mostly Pachysandra and some volunteer shrubs that I think are considered invasive. So it's been definitely a work in progress. I've started working first in this general area here, taking out the Pachysandra. And I struggled for a few years because no matter what I did, it didn't seem like anything would grow well. So probably 6-7 years ago, I had, I think, 5 yards of compost hauled in and mixed that in here. And things started doing better. And then I decided I probably ought to start fertilizing a little more heavily. So since I've had the compost in and have been fertilizing, the hostas have finally taken hold. one really big plant back there was a volunteer that I found along my neighbor's driveway over there. I think it's the snake root. The astilbes are finally thriving. I've got a couple little primula that I love. They're not flowering now, but they were flowering as late as mid-December last year, and they were flowering early in March of this year. So they're a beautiful little, both late and spring plant. One other thing I've got quite a bit in here is the spiderwort. When I first had spiderwort in here, I hated it. I was pulling it up by the handful. I thought it was kind of a messy plant because it kind of sprawls all over. And then I started looking at it a little more benignly when I realized it was the one plant that survived regardless of what I did to it, and the deer left it alone completely. So at that point I thought, well, maybe I ought to go see if there's maybe some other colors of spiderwort, and I did find some back here that there's some white ones and there's some pink ones that are just beginning to bloom now. They don't seem to spread quite as much as the purple ones, so I've definitely taken a liking to that plant now that I realize how tough it is and resistant to wildlife. Other than that, I've got a couple bleeding hearts. I've got the yellow leaf ones. The pink ones over there by the rhododendron just stopped flowering. And then just a little mix of some other things. You'll notice I still have a big patch of lily of the valley right along the edge here, which was here when I came in, and I just didn't have the heart to pull any more of that out when I was pulling out a lot of the other plants, Pachysandra and some of the lily of the valley. So I've left that. It smells so beautiful in the spring that I just decided it could stay where it is. And then the back has been kind of a mix. I've thrown some different plants in there. Some have done really well, others haven't. So a lot of it is sort of, at this point it kind of does what it wants. I've tried so many different things. Some things just plain won't grow for me, and then other things do really well. So it's kind of a hodgepodge. Again, I don't really have any other philosophy other than what I like and what will grow and what the deer don't eat. Well, we're behind the garage. When I moved in, this area was pretty well overgrown with the burning bush, which is considered an invasive species. So there was really nothing back here but, not particularly attractive shrubs. Probably about 12 years ago, I realized that this had been a pond at one point when I was digging around, but it had been all filled in with soil. So I dug it out, and it wasn't until last fall that I actually got around to making it back into a pond. It had been a concrete pond at one point. Most of those big rocks were there, so I kind of had to live with those and figure out how to get a new pond in here and to work waterfalls in. But finally this spring I managed to get it so it's not leaking anymore, and it seems to be doing really well. It's just a nice little trickling noise. The plants here, some are doing well. Unfortunately, my dog also has a problem with trying to run through them. So some of them have gotten a little bit smashed, but generally things are doing fairly well. I don't have any fish or anything in it because I don't want to have to keep it filled in the winter or take the fish in. So it's just a summer attraction. And then again, a lot of hostas, a lot of things that like shade. This is very, very shady back here. This is a hemlock. I did notice that it had woolly adelgid this year, so I did do some treatment on that, and it looks like it's doing pretty well. One of the native species I have is one over there is the witch hazel, and the shrub exactly to your left is a calycanthus, and that's an interesting shrub with the flowers on it. It's blooming right now. I've only found, though, considering all the flowers, I've probably only found about 3 or 4 seed pods on it over the last few years, so it doesn't go to seed very readily. Although I did get some to germinate this year, and I've got them up by my back door waiting for them to get big enough that I can transplant a few more of them. But nothing terribly unusual back here. Again, it's very, very dry, so I find that a lot of things really may not do as well as you would expect just because it's too dry and probably a little bit too much shade for a lot of things. So the pond is probably the most interesting feature. But the last thing I did was over here. It's finally coming along pretty well now this spring. A couple of the changes was there was a huge, huge white pine here that I had cut down at the end of December. So that's given me a little bit more light here. I had put in these 2 shrubs a couple of years ago. The deer also have pruned them back. That's why I've got a little netting on them. But they're finally becoming a little bit more established. With a little more light, I think they'll do better. The boardwalk, though, was what I think is most fun. My next 2 neighbors down was tearing up his deck last year, and these were the planks off his deck that he was throwing away. He was just throwing them out on the curb. So I thought it would make a nice little boardwalk through here, add a little interest, and give me something maybe to plant around. So I hauled them all down here, cut them up, and made myself a little garden path. And then I went out and got some ferns. And then this year's just stuck in some impatience for a little bit of color. I do have several different ferns. One of these I think is called the ghost fern. Some more wild ginger, which I've had in the back. I just dug some of that up and transplanted that. Another white bleeding heart here. And then of course the rhododendron is a real accent. That's done really, really well this year. That was one that I had dug up from a neighbor, just a little twig, probably 8-10 years ago. And it's probably taken off and grown the best of any of the rhododendrons I've had in my yard. So this is just, again, something that just sort of sprung up, no real plan. Just sort of going with what's here and what I can improve upon. Well, all right, this little garden here I put in last fall, again, because the grass wouldn't grow, so I got tired of it. My son always asks me what I want for Christmas, and I always say, oh, garden ornaments are neat. So he's got a place, he's from Philadelphia, that sells these wacky little scrap metal animals. This is a goat, and he wanted me to be sure that I realized it was an anatomically correct billy goat. He'd previously given me the little turtle that's down on that one there. The goat moves around a bit. The neighbors do find it interesting that the goat will turn up in various spots in the garden. You know, they wander. But mostly in this garden I've got lavender and yarrow and the sundial. That's probably where it gets the most full sun. And then just more different junipers back here. Again, things that the deer don't eat. And then just for a little color, some planters on my front step. But it's been fun. I always like to come up with new plants and look for new things to do. I'm running out of space at this point, but people are always welcome to stop by too. If I'm out, I'm more than happy to show people my garden. I put all this effort into it, and most of it nobody can see. So if anyone wants to stop by and visit, I'm always more than happy to show people around. Thank you.